that, like, I'm not an English speaker. English is my second language, so like if you find it difficult to follow me, somewhere just stop and ask me to repeat. I would be like more than happy to do that. particular hip hop video is about negative stereotyping of Muslim youth from Kerala. That's where I'm coming from. So I shot that particular video because it's important for the talk. So Mappila, Muslim Masculinity, a History of the Contemporary. That's the title of my talk, and it's part of my PhD, which is tentatively titled as Islamic Moral Publics and Masculinity, a study of South Indian masculinities, which is in progress, and hopefully within 2 years I'll submit. So the main argument in my talk today is that Malayali modernity is a synthesis of colonial modernity and Savarna nationalism, and which is exclusive of marginalized identities such as Mappila Muslims and Dalit. I'll explain who are Mappilas and Dalit little later. Protruding philosophical incompatibility between liberal tradition of Malayali modernity and non-liberal Mappila Muslim communitarian tradition, epistemological project of Malayali modernity discursively homogenizes subordinate masculinities such as Mappila Muslim masculinity. However, heterogeneity of Mappila masculinities exposes the scant stereotype of Mappila identity as hypermasculine. This is basically the structure of my talk today. So I'll start with the contemporary studies of Muslim masculinity across the globe. It's actually Muslim masculinity is a budding subfield of men and masculinity studies, and like some of the scholars who have worked on that in that area came up with this conclusion that studies of Islamic masculinities are surprisingly rare. There are very few studies that render Muslim men as gendered subjects. Usually, Muslim men are silenced, often unheard, and frequently distorted. Stigmatized masculinity, especially after 9/11. Muslim men are viewed by both the left and right as the vanguard of patriarchal and homophobic suppression and pre-modern in contrast to an enlightened West. In Indian case, simultaneous production of a scapegoated and excessively masculine Muslim other. This is how usually we have the literatures or the studies about Muslim men across the globe. And since I'm talking about Mappila Muslims in Kerala, I just wanna actually tell you like the setting. I'm coming from a place called Kerala. This is the state, and Malabar is the northern Kerala. And the uniqueness of India is that India is highly diverse. It is multi-religious, multi-linguistic, and like I am coming from this particular state, and I speak Malayalam, but the people from Tamil Nadu, they speak Tamil. People from Karnataka, they speak Kannada. People from Maharashtra, they speak Marathi. People from Gujarat, they speak Gujarati. So like there are different languages. So I cannot talk to somebody from Karnataka in their language or in my language unless we don't know, we know Hindi or English. So I don't speak Hindi, so for me it's really difficult to talk to people from different states. So basically what I'm gonna say is that Indian states are linguistically formed after the States Reorganization Act in 1956, and India is such a diverse, so Muslims as well as Christians or any other religious groups or ethnic groups are as diverse as this map shows. So Muslims here from this particular state are different from the Muslims from northern part. So what I'm saying is that South Indian Muslims are unique. They are different from North Indian Muslims. Now, India, as I already told you, like we have a lot of religions like Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Sikhism, and all that. But majority of Indians, about 80% of Indians believe in Hinduism. And the basic societal structure of Hinduism is like this, that they have a myth of creator God. He is called Brahma, and people who are derived out of his mouth are called Brahmins. So they are the priests and academics. So like I don't know like whether you know Indian academicians mostly they'll be named after something Chakravarti or Chatterjee or something like that. So it means they belong to this particular caste group. And the second one is Kshatriya. Third, they are warriors and kings, politicians, and third, Vaishyas. They are mostly businessmen, and fourth one is Shudra. They are servant, subordinate to Vaishyas. So these four groups are called caste Hindus. The people who don't belong to this particular hierarchy are called the Dalits. They are the untouchables. So even though legally it is abolished, culturally it still exists in the socio-cultural space of India. That's how social hegemony works. So,
can we ask a question?
Yeah.
Where are the farmers in this?
Farmers here, Shudras.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they are servants, farmers, and all that. So, according to Indian Vedic tradition, this is how the structure, and this is called Chadur Varnya, 4 colors. But apart from this, there are thousands of caste. That is Jadi in our language, and it's translated into English as caste. So there are thousands of caste, and like this caste are actually included either any of these 4 categories. And apart from this, we have Sikhs, we have Christians, we have Muslims. They are actually, apart from this caste hierarchy. And this is how the basic Indian social structure. Now, having given that, like I'm coming to the Malabar region. That's the northern region of Kerala. Now I'm actually giving you the details of the setting or the field of my study. So Malabar region consists of northern districts of Malayalam speaking, that's my language, South Indian state of Kerala. And one interesting thing about Kerala is that Kerala is the first state in the world to democratically elect a communist government. And still, in the last election again, communist government came into power. So that's an interesting thing about Kerala. And Malabar India has been under the rule of Britishers like for about 2 centuries, and Malabar was province of British East India Company, and it has been made part of Kerala in 1956 when the linguistic reorganization of Indian state was implemented. And one of the biggest event in the history of Malabar Mappilas or Malabar is called Malabar Rebellion. It is also called Mappila Rebellion or Mappila Lehala, Mappila Revolt. It's a fight against the Britishers during 1928. It's a freedom fight against Britishers. And there are like different readings of this particular event. I will come to that little later. But after this 1921, we can divide Malabar into 2, Northern Malabar and Southern Malabar, because this 1921 event took place in Southern Malabar, where a lot of Dalits, the untouchables, they converted to Islam, and they constitute a large number of Muslims in Southern Malabar, whereas in Northern Malabar, it's mostly upper caste people. They are called Nayars. They are the predominant upper caste group from Malabar. So they converted in Northern Malabar. So the social, there is a difference in the social as well as in the cultural of Southern Malabar as well as Northern Malabar. So demographically, the region is predominantly Hindu, but the majority of Kerala Muslim population called Mappilas live in this part, Malabar, so place called Malabar region. It's a predominantly Hindu area, but like majority of Muslims, Mappila Muslims live there. So major political parties of the area is Communist Party, Muslim League, National Congress, this is a nationalist party, and BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party, this is Hindu nationalist party or Hindu right. And in Kerala, the spread of Islam was mainly through trade by Arab merchants and gradual conversion of natives to Islam in 7th century AD. Unlike North India, in northern part of India, Islam came through military occupation, whereas in the south, it is not the case. That their history is entirely different. It came through the mercantile relationship with Arab merchants, even in the times of Prophet Muhammad. So that's about Malabar region. There are a lot of details I'm giving, what is required for today. And Mappila Muslims. The term Mappila, Mappila ethnicity, the term Mappila derived from, like there are differences of opinion. I'm just giving like 2-3 important opinions, that from Mahapillai, Maha means big and Pillai means child. That's a title of honor conferred on immigrants. And second one is Mappillai. Mappillai means son-in-law in Tamil. That's our neighboring state, Tamil Nadu. And our language called Malayalam is derived from Tamil. So when Arab merchants came to Kerala, they got married to native women. So they are son-in-laws of, native people. So they are called Mappillai. That's another opinion. And the third one is from Pillai. That's one of the predominant upper caste Hindus. So they converted to Islam and they are called Muslim Pillais. In colonial references, it's always not Muslim, it's always referred as Muslim, M-O-S-L-E-M. So Muslim Pillai. So that later on became Mappillai. These are the like different versions of the origin of the term Mappila. And demography, almost 1/4 of Kerala population. It's about like some 26% of total Kerala population. And Mappilas have a like strong diasporic community. There are a lot of Mappilas, about like I think more than 3 million Mappilas work in the Middle East as a workforce, and they brought home the socio-cultural influence of Arab. And now we have something called Salafism or Reformism, Salafi Reformism or Salafism, different versions of Salafism and everything. So this is actually the influence of this diasporic culture. And another thing about Mappilas is that they have a unique culture. In India, usually Muslims use Urdu language, even though other people, like majority of the people use Hindi, Muslims use Urdu. So Urdu is like somehow connected to Muslims, but in Kerala, Muslims doesn't use Urdu language. They use Malayalam. All Keralates, even Hindus, Muslims, Christians, everybody use Malayalam. And Muslims of Kerala have a particular language called Arabic Malayalam. So that's kind of a combination of both Arabic and Malayalam, Arabic letters and Malayalam sound. And music, there is a genre called Mappila Patu. So that's very popular in Kerala. There are dance forms, Opana, this is women's dance, and Dafumutu, this is men's dance. There are many more, I'm just giving some examples. Then food culture is also different. It's a blend of traditional Kerala and Arab food culture because of this mercantile relationship as well as this migration to Gulf countries. And usually most of the Mappila Muslims are Sunnis of Shia school. But when we call Sunnis in Kerala, it actually refers to traditional Sunnis. There are traditional Sunnis among Sunnis. The traditional Muslims are called Sunnis. So when we go in Kerala and we call them Sunni, it means the traditional Muslims there. And then there are Salafi reformists and then political Islam. So this is represented by Samasta Kerala, Jamiatul Ulama. There are a lot of groups called Nadwatul Mujahideen, Salafi groups, and this is Jamaat Islami. And there are like many more groups. I'm giving like the most prominent one. And there is also like reformist versus traditionalist tensions. That's how all this organization came into being. There wasn't any organization before, but when the reformist trend came, they came up with an organization first, then the traditional Muslims also organized like their own organization. So historians have traced the emergence of reformist trends in late 18th century South Asia to specific circumstances such as the decline of Muslim political power, because India ruled by Mughals and like a lot of Muslim kings for centuries. Then growing influence of British colonialism. Then after Muslims, then it was Dutch, Portuguese, then Britishers. Later the emergence of Hindu revivalism. Now it's kind of like it's becoming more of Hindu right. So now I'm going to the construct of fanatic Mappila. So I have already talked about Mappila Rebellion of 1921 And Muslims of Kerala, they commemorate this Mappila Rebellion as a heroic struggle against the Britishers and feudal lords, but Hindu right portrayed as a communal and fanatic atrocities committed on the Hindus. And Mappila Rebellion has been read given different readings by different scholars. Colonial historiography there depicts it as irrational and aggressive religious fanaticism to attain martyrdom. So martyrdom is something very important in Kerala for communists and Muslims and for even Hindu right. And these are some of the scholars who portray it that way. And nationalist historiography depicted it as anti-feudal agrarian movement involving religious sentiments. Because when British were ruling, the upper caste Hindus also supported them. So the Dalits and Muslims joined together and they fought Britishers. So they fought against the feudal lords too, because they were landless, they were peasants, and that's how the entire history of that particular area called South Malabar changed. However, subaltern historiography unravels the epistemological project of both the colonial and nationalist historiography and consequent erosion of one of the biggest anti-colonial struggles in India. So this is one of the biggest even, but it is not there anywhere in the nationalist historiography of India. So the problem is the term fanatic was enforced and administered into existence in their attempt to civilize the barbaric Mappila. That's how the post-colonial critique of colonialism, it has been camouflaged as enlightening project. So the Westerners colonized Eastern or Asia or some other countries, saying that to enlighten these countries, these barbaric people. So, protruding the fanatic construct of the Mappilas who took part in the rebellion chose to die in the battle than being captured, colonial historiography articulates the rebellion, which involved different social and political factors such as colonialism, feudalism, as suicidal jihad. So they did not, when they were caught, they fought again to get, died in the battle instead of getting caught by the Britishers. And colonial representation of fanatic involves twofold reduction, a reduction to religion and reduction of the religion. All the adjectives used by British to describe Mappilas contribute and determine, on one hand, the concept of fanatic determine this characteristic on the other. And epistemological project of colonial modernity, which constructed the stereotype of irrational hypermasculine Mappila built around religious fanaticism, created a superior versus subordinate binary between rational colonial modernity and irrational Islamic religiosity. So that's the binary created over there. And after the fanatic Mappila, now I come to something called love jihad. That's the current controversy going on in Kerala. So this is the hypermasculine construct of, this fanatic construct is reverberating in the current everyday sociality of Kerala. And the latest development is this love jihad, which is fundamentalist and youthful Muslims convert Hindu and Christian women to Islam through trickery and false love. So here what happens is that the militant fanatic image is transfigured into a Romeo playboy image in the changed context of increasing visibility of Muslim students in educational institutions after Mandal Commission affirmative action. Because in India, Muslims and Dalits didn't have much space in educational as well as academic employment spaces. So in 1980s, a government appointed a committee to study this and they implemented an affirmative action. Then the number of Dalits and Muslims increased in college campuses. So after that visibility, then the fanatic image transfigured into kind of playboy or Romeo image. But both of these construct invokes Islamic religiosity. So drawing on diverse, there are a lot of newspaper debates and gossips, television debates, pamphlets, cinema, posters, novels, myths, rumors, gossip. So this is how the everyday sociality is controlled And in this everyday sociality or the discourse of contemporary, Mappila male body is constructed as something fanatic or, invoking Islamic religiosity, using the word jihad or something like that. So now, given that, I'm just giving you the philosophical incompatibility between sociologically individuated liberal modern tradition and communitarian tradition. So the difference is that in modernity historically shaped by the coming together of a variety of concepts, practices, sensibilities. The things that included in modernity is that I called Kavidat, capitalist industrialization, the increasing centrality of state in the social order, urbanization, sociological individuation, secularization, politics and ethics, the creation of new order of knowledge, vast changes in the organization of family and intimacy, and changes in the fields of artistic and literary culture. So the process of modernization actually means all this: secularization, liberalization, individualization, technologization, and so on. So the postmodernist critique of modernity would be that modernity universalizes human experience. So if you actually take the concepts called secularism, people like Talal Asad, they say that it's not just about a political doctrine. Secularism is also an epistemological project, and he calls that project the secular. And he gives the example of bodily torture. In modern bodily torture like tattooing or plastic surgery or whatsoever, it is considered to be agential, whereas religious bodily torture, like in India, the Shia Muslims, they do some kind of bodily torture on Muharram Day, and there are like some Hindu groups, they also like do some bodily torture as part of their worship. So this is considered irrational, whereas modern bodily torture is considered rational. So it creates a division, superior inferior binary. So this particular trend is called as Imperialism of Knowledge by scholars like Ashish Nandi. He says a significant aspect of the post-colonial structure of knowledge in the third world is a peculiar form of imperialism. A conceptual domain is sometimes hegemonized, so effectively that the original domain vanishes from our awareness. Now, if you take the case of humanism, there is always an implicit reference to white men. And about feminism, Rosie Baraidoti, she says, like, historically and structurally, feminism is secular. So the normativity of modernity often derived out of the experience of Western white liberal tradition, and hence is incompatible at times with traditions of differences. For example, about feminism, there was a call by white feminists in 1970s to dismantle families because families was instrumental of their oppression for white women. But whereas for the blacks, it is not the case. For them, being able to form families and communities were, means of empowerment, because for them, oppression, centuries-old oppression, slavery, it operated through, dismantling their families and communities. So there are differences of life experiences. So when we universalize, white women's experience, then it's problematic. So now I'm giving the philosophical incompatibility. It doesn't mean that in terms of practicality it is not the case. It is, I'm saying only this is a philosophical incompatibility. However, in terms of practicality, in the real life, the overarching presence of modernity has a increasing influence upon modern individual as well as collective identities, including religious as well as Dalit, blacks, all the groups. So I'm just giving the sensory modalities. In modernity advocates print capitalism and subsequent reading and individuated thinking. Mappila community, which is religious, espouses Islamic concept of some or vertical listening, which is hierarchical in structure, where the subject embody and enact what otherwise would be called internalization of structural subordination. Charles Hishkin from University of California has done an extensive study of this. It's called Ethical Soundscape. It's about Egyptian cassette sermon culture. And in case of gender, I have already talked. Sociality in modernity is based on autonomous individuality, whereas in the religious tradition it is community living, wherein the liberal understanding of self-autonomous liberal body does not make sense. So this is philosophical differences. However, in terms of practicality, it is not the case. Everybody is equally influenced by modernity, and the increasing trend of modernization is like pretty much visible among Mappila community too. So now I come into Malayali modernity. I call this Keralian. I'll come to that. So I am arguing that Malayali modernity is a combination of colonial Western modernity and Savarna native nationalism. Like there are scholars like Dilip Menon, they also argued in the same way. And according to J. Raghu, he is a Dalit intellectual from Kerala. He says there are two modes of othering in the formation of modern Savarna identity. One is internal and other is external. The former is directed at the native subalterns such as Dalits, whereas the latter at Muslims. However, later on the othering of Muslims is intensified when an inclusive native nationalism was imagined, irrespective of internal caste discrimination, strategically by partially admitting the political and legal, not religious agency of the Dalits. And the Hindu right, succeeded in this, and they got into power through, mobilizing Hindu votes, including like untouchables. So I call this Kerala modernity Keralian because it's usually, that's how Malayalis, whenever they get together, they call it Keralian. They call it Keraliya Samskara, that means Kerala culture, Keraliya Tanima, the original Kerala. So whenever they go out of Kerala, like Gulf countries or European countries or even in America, so when they get together, at least once in a year they get together and they call it Keralian. That's how they call it. So usually this Keralian or this get together is conducted for the festival like Onam. Onam is considered to be the national festival of Kerala, and I'll come to Onam a little later. And before that, I just wanna talk the dress code. The official dress code of Kerala is usually Settu Mundu. I'll show you the picture. So those who wear Settu Mundu, they are traditionally considered to be Malayali Manga. That means Malayali woman. And food culture, vegetarian. Usually upper caste Hindus, they don't eat meat, so they are vegetarian. So like our official food culture has become vegetarian. And all inaugurations, like whenever we have some governmental functions or some other beginning of a film or whatsoever it is, we start it by setting light to something called Nelavalak. I will show you the picture in the next slides. So Onam, that's the official festival. There are two interpretations for this Onam. One is Maveli myth. Maveli is like, that's a religious myth of Hindus, and secondly, harvest myth. So that's how we secularize that event. Onam, however, is nowhere in the memory of Dalits, Adivasis, Muslims in either ways, as the former being a Savarna religious myth, whereas the later Savarna feudal myth. So I will come to that in the next slides in the picture. So this is how we celebrate Onam, and this is Maveli. Maveli is believed to be like one of the old kings, and he is an Asura king. So in Hindu mythology, Asuras are demons, whereas Devans are heroes. So when he ruled over Kerala really good, Devas, or the heroes, they got jealous and they asked, this is God. He asked the God to destroy him, and the God came and he sent him into underground. So this is this is a religious myth. So this is this white sari, this is Settu Mundu. So this is like with a golden line. So this is typically considered to be the official dress code of Malayalis. But however, the problem is this is actually the dress code of Savarna group, upper caste or the Nayar community. And the second myth of Onam is, this is harvest myth. So this is one of the Dalit group, like untouchable students group from Kerala. They protested against, conducting Onam as if it is the celebration of all Malayalis. So these are the arguments. They say, why should we celebrate your harvest festival when it always left us landless, poor and deprived? Even though if it is harvest festival, that's the festival of landlords. They are the upper caste. So this is puja. This is the beginning, inauguration of a cinema shooting. These people are actors, and this is called Nilavalaku. So it's setting light to this, and that's how they inaugurate. So this is actually a Savarna or an upper caste tradition, their religious tradition, but it is considered to be, the national or secular ceremony of whole Kerala. So what I'm basically saying is that the secular, what we call secular or what we call the national, is actually an elaboration of upper caste Hindus or caste Hindus. So now, having given that difference or the discourse of Malayali modernity, now I come to hegemonic and subordinate masculinities. So, protruding the incongruence or incompatibility, modernity creates superior inferior binary that I have already talked. Now there are people like Goodman in his trafficking anthropology. They say like it is anthropologists who historically develop homogenized native men. So they create homogenetically, like that's how, like he gives the example of Mexican machismas, hypermasculine. Bell Hooks in her real cool, it's about white masculinity. She talks about this black, exotic black. How is the construct of exotic black? The homogenized construct of exotic black is created. And in answer, I mean, we have already discussed this fanatic Mappila. So this is black scholars critique this homogenization of masculinity for its explicit racial underpinnings when power is solely conceptualized in terms of sex difference. So the real reason of this homogenization is not their masculinity or hypermasculinity or excessive masculinity, it is their adjectival identity or subordinate marginalized identity. So at the center of the way black male selfhood is constructed in white supremacist capitalist patriarchy is the image of the brute, untamed, uncivilized, unthinking, unfeeling. And Cornel West says in his Race Matters, white fear of black sexuality is a basic ingredient of white racism. Coming into Kerala context, masculine public sphere is the public sphere of Kerala, which is masculine, is a grey area between the casteism of Hindu right, that is the Savarna discourse of the upper caste, and the progressive left. So the left, they appeared to be, challenging or questioning casteism. They also somehow internalize casteism, and that's how, caste male become the representative of hegemonic masculinity. So hegemonic masculinity in Kerala is commonly regarded to be vegetarian, upper caste, yet they are progressive, male, while subordinate masculinities are beef eating. So beef eating is something, it is banned in Kerala, in India, most of the states, not everywhere, Mappila Muslims and Dalit males. So I will come to beef eating a little later. So consumerist hegemonic masculinity was in need of a new means of control, the increasing visibility of subaltern masculinities as an after effect of economic prosperity gained by migrating to Persian Gulf. So in the 1980s, especially people from subaltern background like Muslim, Mappila Muslims and Dalits, they migrated to Gulf countries and they earned a lot of money, and so that consequently they gained visibility in social structure. So then in the film culture of Kerala changed. Till then it was like single hero of upper caste origin, of high morale, but then when these people gained social visibility, then the films started, representing fraudulent men of subordinate, homosocial, fraudulent, a group of men together, and there is no, that ideal hero. Now it has become foolish men who make, like, fraudulent things to make others laugh. So that's what Jenny Rovina's argument. And masculinizing of subordinate men was instrumental to representing hierarchy between upper caste masculinity and the other men, and also to produce masculine values as a means to subordinate masculinities. So coming to Mappila Muslim case, yes, I have already told you it's simultaneous construction of an oppressed and violent, excessively masculine Muslim other. Osallas, Filippo Osalla and Carolina Osalla, they argue that way. And historically, hypermasculinization of Muslims began since 1920s. I have already talked to you about the fanatic in 1921 in Kerala. So apart from that, in 1920 onwards, what happened is that in the literatures, in the films, Muslims have been, subjected to be represented as hypermasculine. And the context is that when militant Hindu assertion reached new heights in the context of movements such as Shuddhi, this is a purification movement to reclaim the converted from Hindu to other religions such as Christianity and Islam, and Sangadan, this is an organization in defense of Hindu interest launched by Arya Samaj. So the difference is that, unlike the current Romeo image, the then representation was that of a fanatic or militant, but now it has become more of a playboy, cool guy. The thing is that, like, the girls from Hindu community, they are always advised that you should be careful while talking to Muslim youth, because like they will make you fall in love and like they will make you convert to Islam. That's the argument. So there are striking similarities between this construction of Muslim men and that of colonial modernity. In both cases, Islamic religiosity is invoked. Muslim men are excessively masculine both ways, and Islamic religiosity is invoked, love jihad in the former, while suicidal jihad in the latter. So these are like number of novelists, writers. They actually portrayed Muslims as lecherous behavior, high sexual appetites, life of luxury, religious fanaticism, so on and so forth.